Now that we have a basic understanding of piecewise functions, we're going to use a very practical, everyday example of piecewise function. So here we go. We have a summer job. It pays time and a half for overtime if I work more than 40 hours, standard work week. You make $8 an hour. So let's just jump right in and we'll figure out what happens. So how much money do I make if I work 10 hours? We're not going to take taxes into account here because then we'd have very little left over. But if I work 10 hours at $8 an hour, you know what to do here. So I'm going to write down what's happening, even though it might be common sense, because you're probably already thinking it's $80 and let's just move on. I hear you. Good. But what I'm really going to do is write down what's happening. So when I get to the ones that are a little more complicated, like when I've worked 41 hours or 50 hours, it'll become pretty obvious what to do. So I'm working 10 hours at $8 an hour. So it's going to be 8 times 10, and that's going to give me 80. And again, I know that seems really basic and elementary, but we're just going to go with it. And the graph is here so we can graph this as well and see what this would look like. So I'm going to go ahead and start plotting some points. So we'll switch colors. We'll switch to red. Don't know why. When I worked 10 hours, I made $80. So there's a point right there. Okay? So let's go to the next one. When I worked 35 hours at $8 an hour, I have 8 times 35. And 8 times 35 is going to give me 280. That's $280. I'm going to put a dollar sign on those just to put it in context. So let's come over here to 35. And we're going to go up to 280. Notice we're counting by 40s here. So 280 is halfway between 240 and 320. So here's 35, comma, 280. All right, then when I work 40 hours, I have, well, $8 an hour times 40, and that's going to give me $320. And so $40 hours, gives me 320. We have a nice little line right here. And I'm going to grab a ruler and I'm going to connect those points. Now, we get in a habit sometimes in math of connecting our dots and just drawing it forever in both directions. Well, that's not the case. And let me throw one more point in here. If I work 0 hours, I earn $0. I think that's common sense. And we're in the first quadrant, which means I can't have a negative number of hours. I can't have a negative number of dollars earned. I can have a negative number of dollars, which means I owe somebody some money, but I can't have a negative number of dollars earned. What I'm going to do is connect these, though. I'm going to stop at this point right here where my pen is. That's at 40, 320. There we go. And this is the graph of what I earn when I work between 0 and 40 hours. So let's kind of review what's going on here. Even though it seems like common sense, it's about to get a little bit different. When I have a piecewise function, I have more than one thing going on. I have a certain part of the function for certain x values and another part of the function for other x values, and it might have multiple pieces. It might have 6 or 7 or 8, or if it was the tax code, it would have hundreds. So there are lots of little conditions that would need to be met in certain circumstances. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to go ahead and write the function. What do you mean by that? I'm going to actually write f of x is, and f represents my pay. So just to be clear, I'm going to say that this is my pay, and x is the number of hours. I just want to be clear with what everything represents. So x is hours and f is pay, and you could use h for hours if you wanted to, and p if you wanted for pay. That's fine. I just choose not to. And we're going to have a couple pieces to our piecewise function. And the first one is the obvious one. That was not a very attractive bracket. Sorry, I just drew that ugly bracket, but we'll go with it. The first piece says, well, $8 an hour times the number of hours. So we saw that here. This was the common sense part. So 8x. So every how many hours I work, I multiply it by 8, and that's how much I earn. And that's pretty straightforward. And this works for all the x values that are less than 40, which means I've worked 40 or less than 40 hours. Now, it also could mean that if I've worked exactly 40 hours, I get that. So we'll do less than or equal to 40. So when I work up to and including 40 hours, then this is my pay. Now, if you want to get really picky about this, and I'm not, but if you wanted to get really picky, you could say that instead of saying X is less than or equal to 40, you could say this right here, it's between 0 and 40, and saying that it's between 0 and 40 just gives that common sense thing of, well, I can't work a negative number of hours. The lowest number of hours I could possibly work is 0. I can't work -1 hours, but that's sort of common sense. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it exactly like this right here. Okay, so now we're going to go and work some overtime. So we have now just worked 41 hours. Well, how much did I earn? I don't know. Let's find out. So if I worked 41 hours, then, well, let me tell you what I did do. I worked 40 hours. And then I worked another hour. Okay, so I have earned 8 times 40. I've earned $320. And then I earned, wait a minute now. Okay, let's go back to the directions. I get time and a half for overtime. So instead of getting $8, I get 8 plus half of 8. Well, half of 8 is 4. So I'm going to get $12 an hour for every hour over 40. So I'm going to earn 12 for that 1 extra hour I work. So here's my 40 hours. There's 41 hours. Here's my first 40, and here's my extra hour. So if you were to type this in your calculator, you would have 320 plus 12, which is going to give you 332. Now, good luck graphing that. 332 is kind of hard to spot on here. So we're not going to graph this point, but we are going to graph the next one, which will be relatively easy to spot. Okay, let's work 50 hours. So if I'm going to work 50 hours, then I have worked 40. So 8 times 40. This is consistently going to be 320. So when I work more than 40 hours, I've earned $320 plus $12 an hour for every hour over 40. Okay, so if I worked 50 hours, then I have worked 10 hours over 40. So there's that. Okay, so here's 320. Here's 120. And when I put those together, I'm going to have 440. I've earned $440. Let's plot that point, okay? Let's plot that one. So I'm going to go over to 50 hours and 440. And there's not necessarily a maximum number of hours that I could work in a week other than the maximum number of hours in a week, which of course is 176 if I'm not mistaken. 168, wow, as well, sorry. First lesson I've taught in a while. So what I'm going to do is connect these. I'm going to connect this dot with that dot and then just extend it a little bit. And I said that about the maximum number of hours I could work, meaning I could just draw this out pretty far, but I can't draw it any further out than 168 hours. We'll just stop it there. But I hope you notice what this graph looks like. It's just two pieces. There's a piece and there's a piece. There's two separate pieces to this piecewise function. And so there's working 40 hours and then, or less, and then there's working more than 40 hours. So now we're going to come up with an equation for this piece, and this is where things are going to get a little bit tricky. So when I work more than 40 hours, then I automatically earn $320, and then I earn $12 more. Let's pause here for just a second. Now this is far from complete, but let's just keep going with it. 320 is this 8 times 40. Just saying. And then it's going to be plus 12 times the number of hours that I've worked over 40. Okay, so I can't just put an X there. I can't just put an X here, because if I put an X here, then if I have 50 hours worked, then I'm going to have 12 times 50. Well, I'm not getting $12 per hour for 50 hours. I'm getting $12 an hour for just the ones over 40. So when I worked 41 hours, I only got 1 extra hour. When I worked 50 hours, I got 10 extra hours. If I work X hours, then it's 40. Whoops, I just wrote that wrong. It's x minus 40. It's the number of hours I work minus 40. I was about to write it backwards. That'd be tragic, wouldn't it? So x minus 40. So every how many hours I work, and subtract 40 from it, and that's the extra amount that I worked. And that is going to work for all the x values greater than 40. So here are our two pieces. If I want to know how much money I earn for any x value of hours worked, I'll use this when I work less than or equal to 40 hours. I'll use this expression, this piece of the function, when I work more than 40 hours.